Great to have you here today. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Redemption Church. My name is Brandon. I get the awesome privilege of being one of the pastors here on staff. Today is the final installment of our series called Dollars Cents. So if today is the final week, that means next week we're kicking off a brand new series. Next week we are kicking off a series called Party Animals. Any party animals in here? All right, the first service was way funner than you guys. Well, here's what we see in the scriptures. God loves throwing parties, mega parties. And so we're going to talk about God and his parties and our invitation to be a part of throwing some amazing parties. So I'd encourage you to be here next week. That series will take us all the way to April 12th. Guess what April 12th is? Easter. That's exactly right. We will have 3 services here on Easter. We will have an 8 o'clock service. You guys aren't early risers. Don't worry about that one. We'll have a 9:30 service, and then we'll have an 11 o'clock service. I know that you're my people, late wakers. So we will have this service. So we'll have 8, 9:30, and 11. We encourage you, go ahead now, invite friends and family members to be a part of that amazing day. We always throw a huge party here. So speaking of party and party animals, we'll be throwing a huge party, Easter egg hunts, food trucks. It's going to be amazing. So go ahead and plan for Easter Sunday to be here, bring family members and friends. Well, we are in the final week of our series called Dollars and Cents. And here's where we've been so far. The first week, we laid out a really clear caution that whenever we handle money, it's not just about the money. Whenever a financial transaction happens, a heart transaction has already happened. Jesus said, wherever your money is, there's your heart. And so at the beginning of this series, when we're talking about managing our money well, we said just be very, very clear with you and your family and yourself. This is a heart issue. And so we dealt with the heart. The second thing we did is we gave a very clear perspective. That when we think about money, we don't think of it as being our money. The Bible depicts it in this way. You've been entrusted with resources that are not your own, but in fact, they are the Lord's. So everything that you and I have is not actually ours, it's the Lord's. The earth and the fullness thereof is the Lord's. And so that's a great caution, a great perspective. And then we started getting really practical a few weeks ago about, okay, well, how do we handle our money? In light of this being a heart issue, in light of all this being God's. And we said the first step is the plan is to give. We want to be radically generous people. We think generosity is the best way to live. We looked at some secular research that actually found generous people are happier and they live longer. Just part of how God's wired it and designed it. Generous people. So we want to be known for radical generosity. Second, we want to save and invest. So we looked at that last week, and Pastor Ross, he said, he preached from Proverbs 21:20. He says, precious oil, treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours all that he has. So wise people store up, they save, they invest. This is how it works. So the first thing we're going to do is be radically generous. Second thing is we're going to save and invest our money. And last, we're going to live on all the rest. That's going to be our focus here today. Let me start by telling you a story, and it's a movie that I recently saw. How many of you have seen the movie Harriet? Raise your hand. All right, great. Literally, me and you will have a conversation. Everybody else is out of here. You guys don't like to party and you don't watch movies. What do you guys like to do in this service? I need to better connect with you. It's a movie about Harriet Tubman. You know anything about Harriet Tubman? She was a slave in the 1800s. She ended up getting married to an African-American man who was free at that time. And so they went to a lawyer. They were hoping that by marrying him and by having legal documentation, her owner would set her free. That was not the case. And so this movie takes you through her escape from slavery to freedom in Philadelphia. And then amazingly enough, after she got a taste of freedom, She wanted all of her friends and family members to experience freedom. So she went back to where she was a slave, and she helped approximately 70 people escape the freedom. A touching, radical story. And the climax of the movie happens whenever she confronts at the very end her owner, her former owner. And she says this to him: God don't mean people to own people, Gideon. Our time is near. And when she makes that statement, like everything inside of me was like, yeah, like this is what I've been feeling the whole movie. And finally, she's able to look at that monster in the face and go, hey, God intends for people to be free, Gideon. So everything inside of you is like, yes, I'm so glad this happens. And she escapes and helps the other slaves escape. What a wonderful, wonderful movie. Now, the truth is God desires all people to experience freedom. All people to experience freedom. In every arena of life, spiritually, physically, financially, every arena of life, God desires that we would be a free people. Let me show you this in the scriptures. The book of Galatians, chapter 5, verse 1. This is a book that was written by a man named Paul. He was an early church father, church planner. So he went around the Roman Empire planning churches, telling people about Jesus. And so there was a church that came to pass in the city of Galatia. And so they learned about Jesus, they heard about Jesus, they began to follow Jesus, they trusted in the gospel. And then slowly over time, there was these people called the Judaizers. And they came in and they began to teach the very people that had just come to faith a different gospel. And this is how it went. They were like, oh, it's good to trust in Jesus. You need that. But you also need to follow the law. And so they set this heavy burden and these rules on these people. And Paul is writing this book of Galatians to refute and to respond what they were teaching. He's like, this is not right. They're teaching you this. Jesus plus the law equals salvation. And they are not, in fact, true. What they're teaching is not the gospel. Here's the gospel. Jesus plus nothing. So you can't earn God's salvation. You can't earn his acceptance. You can't earn his approval. Jesus plus nothing equals everything. So when you trust in Jesus, you become a free person. And this book reaches a climax at Galatians 5, chapter 5, verse 1. And this is what Paul says to them. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. For freedom, Christ has set you free. He's saying Christ has set you free when you trusted in him. All the spiritual bondage that you were in because of your sin, he released you from that fully and completely. And now you're a free people. So he set you free. Now live as free people. Reminds me a lot of the Old Testament. When you go to the book of Exodus, the Israelites, they are enslaved in Egypt. And they cry out, God, look what's happening. God, do something. And God graciously responds. He delivers them. He rescues them out of their slavery. And he brings them to the promised land. And in part, as he brings them to the promised land, he gives them the 10 Commandments. He's saying, I freed you. Now I'm going to teach you how to live as free people. The same thing's occurring right here. He's saying Christ has set you free. Now live as free people. Don't submit to a yoke of slavery. Now, a yoke of that time was this wooden contraption that you would fasten around the necks of two bulls. You would fasten that around their necks, and it would be attached to a plow or a carriage of some kind. And it would literally be a form of slavery for the bulls. They would plow the fields, not able to loosen this yoke. He goes, I don't want you ever to submit to any yoke or form of slavery. I don't want you to experience that. So in every sense of the word, I want you to live as free people. One of the chief characteristics of the Christian life is freedom. One of the chief characteristics of the Christian life is freedom. Christ sets us free. We live now as free people. Now here's the problem. Much like the Israelites as they were on the way to the promised land, we moan and complain. They want to go back to Egypt at some points. They don't know exactly how to live as free people. They're still enslaved in the old life. Well, for you and me, in many ways, we can be enslaved by the old life. The Bible depicts different things that can enslave us. The first, of course, is the law. We just talked about that. You know, the law actually cannot set you free. It can teach you how to live as a free person, but it does not have the capacity to set you free. And by the law, I mean the 10 Commandments. Let's make it really easy. The 10 Commandments, that cannot set you free. You can't try hard enough and go, all right, that's it. This week, here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to steal. I'm not going to hate other people. I'm not going to covet. I'm going to pick myself up by the bootstraps, and I'm going to deliver myself. No, that's not how the law works. The law teaches us that we need a deliverer. We need a savior. It shows us that all of us have fallen short of the glory of God. And so we trust in Jesus, and then as we trust in Jesus, we learn how to live as free people. So we don't obey so that we're saved. We don't obey so that we're accepted. We don't obey so that we're approved of by God. No. We obey because we have been saved. We obey because Jesus has set us free and delivered us. This is really an important distinction. The law cannot save you. It can only enslave you. Another thing that enslaves us is the lies that we believe. Jesus, he's talking to the Jews in John 8, and this is what he says. So Jesus said to the Jews who had believed in him, these are people that had said, okay, we believe you're the Son of God. Listen to what he says to them. If you abide in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So the truth and abiding in the truth and living in the truth, it literally breaks the bondage of slavery. Conversely, lies hold us in bondage. Here's how this could play out in your life. If you have this core belief that you're not lovable, you're not worthy of love, you know that will hold you in bondage in every relationship you have. You'll fail to be as intimate with a romantic partner if you don't consider yourself worthy of love. You'll lack intimacy in your friendships. You'll not want people to get too close because you know that they just won't like what they see. Maybe you feel a sense of worthlessness at your core. You know that will affect your job and your work. You don't feel like you can add any value. You can work hard, but I'm not adding anything. You see how lies will enslave us? And so Jesus says, hey, solution, know the truth, believe in the truth, rest in the truth. So the law, it enslaves us. Lies enslave us. Sin enslaves us. Jesus continues on the conversation, John 8. This is what he says. Jesus answered them, truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. So when we sin, guess who becomes our master? Sin. When we lust, it literally becomes our Lord. When we covet, it becomes our Lord. Sin will entangle you and enslave you. So many Christians are enslaved by their thoughts, their words, their actions. They have a taskmaster, and his name is sin. Now, here's what's really fascinating about this list. There's another thing that we read in the Bible, and this is going to tie it all together. You're like, hey, I thought we were doing a series on like money, and you've not talked about money at all. Financial debt is spoken of as enslaving us. I want to read to you from the book of Proverbs. This was written by King Solomon, the wisest, richest man in all the land. And this is what he says: the rich rules over the poor. Pretty self-explanatory, right? I mean, if you're rich, you're likely powerful, influential. You will likely have a great degree of control, or at least more so than the poor, who are not as powerful. They don't have as much control. They don't have as much influence. Pretty self-explanatory. He looks at the world and goes, okay, I see rich people are ruling over the poor people. But listen to what he says next. And the borrower is a slave of the lender. The borrower is slave of the lender. In other words, when you and I borrow money, the dynamics in that relationship change drastically. Some of you have made a woeful decision to lend money to a family member or friend. And you know, the moment you do that, things begin to change. The dynamics of that relationship fundamentally change. It went from being family members or friends to all of a sudden they owe me a certain amount of money every month. It became a borrower or slave and owner relationship. Because borrowing money literally enslaves us in many, many ways. Now, I want to be very clear about this. Debt is a matter of wisdom, not sin. So I don't think you can read the scriptures and go, okay, I read it is a sin to take on debt. Actually, there's sometimes that it makes sense to take on debt. For example, like a mortgage. That may not necessarily be a bad thing. So we don't read a blanket, debt is sin. It's a matter of wisdom, not sin. So please hear me on that. So what we're talking about is, how do we live in the wisest way possible that we are not slaves to money? We're not slaves to debt. Let me just read some pretty overwhelming statistics that we have as a nation. NerdWallet found in 2019 that the average U.S. household has this. You ready for this? $7,104 in credit card debt. $27,934 in car loans. $46,679 in student loans. The average American household is nearly $82,000 in debt in what we're going to call consumer debt. This is not including mortgages. This is including credit cards. It's not even including medical debt here, but I'm sure that's a part of it. It's including car loans. It's including student loans. $82,000. Solomon would look at that and go, you know, you're a slave if you're borrowing money. You're a slave to that debt. The average household has many chains around it, financially speaking. You're like, all right, well, what about redemption? Here's what's really cool. Nearly 100 people in redemption right now are going through a course called Financial Peace. We have 7 different groups throughout the city, and we're leading one. It's been really fun to watch people just understand finances, personal finances better. But at the beginning of this course, anonymously, you turn in like how much debt you have and how many credit lines do you have. So approximately 50 households turned these stats in. Out of these 50 households, we found that we are $2,404,973 in debt. We have 147 lines of credit or credit cards open. This means that the average household has $48,099.46 in debt. The average household in here, nearly $50,000 in debt, and on average, we have 3 credit cards. What would Solomon look and say about our current financial states? He would say, right now, you have to understand, The dynamics have changed. You've become a slave to the lender. This is a matter of wisdom, not sin, but understand right now you're operating as a slave to your debt. Now, there's many reasons why we go into debt. I mean, think about all the different reasons why people go into debt. There's a lot of different reasons. One is we just aren't content. Pastor Ross spoke on this last week, but we just fail to be content with what we have. And you know, our debt is not a matter of resources. We're more resourced now than we were 10 years ago. Erin L. Isa of NerdWallet, she reported this. Americans' income have grown faster than the cost of living over the past decade. So the cost of living has certainly rose, but our income has risen more significantly, which is great news for many consumers' budgets. But Americans' consumer debt, including on auto loans, student loans, and credit cards, continues to rise. Here's what she's saying. Our income has grown significantly, better than the cost of living, but here's what's also grown during this time, our debt. So we're making more than ever, and yet here we are, we're more in debt than ever. The two just aren't compatible, are they? They are if you understand that this is a heart issue, and we're just not content. We've believed the lies of the marketer. You know, the marketer, this is what they want you to hear. So companies that are marketing their product to you, here's what they want you to think. If I don't have this thing, this experience, if I don't have this, then I'm incomplete. But when I purchase this vehicle, this trip, when I buy this next phone or piece of technology, I'm just one purchase away from happiness. I'm just one purchase away from satisfaction. And literally that's how they market to us. And we bite that bait all the time. Oh yeah, I need it right now. Yes, I just need this to be happy, to be complete, to be satisfied. I just need this thing. And so we're just not content. You know, one of the ways to combat discontentment? I try to teach this to my kids, but I need to preach this to myself a little bit more. Be grateful for what you have. I mean, my kids all the time, we got 4, but that's not fair. Look at them, that's not fair. They get to do that, or they have that thing. Or I want this, or I want that. You know one of the best ways to combat that? What do you have? You know, we always tell our kids this. You know what? Life's not fair. That stopped all the way back in the Garden of Eden. That life is not fair. 2 of our boys have had the opportunity to travel to Haiti. So they get sick of this whenever I say it to them. They go, that's not fair. Look at what they have, or look what they get to do. I'm like, hey, you know what's not fair? Is you have a toilet in your house, and kids in Haiti don't have a toilet in their house. They have to go use the restroom in the jungle. That's not fair, is it? Hey, you get to go to school. I know you don't like school, but it's going to help you get to where you need to be one day. They don't have the opportunity to have the same education. One day, you're going to have job opportunities that they just simply won't have. You have toys. You get a chance to play sports on teams, on real fields. They don't get that. Life is not fair. But be grateful for what you do have, not what you don't have. Many of us are focused on what we don't have instead of what the Lord has entrusted to us. And every time you and I look over the fence, guess what? Discontentment. Look at what they have, I don't have, discontentment. No. Our focus has to be on our side of the fence and thanking the Lord for what we do have. And you know, the more grateful you are about things, the more content you become. We do want to keep up with others, right? I mean, you're going to scroll through your news feed later on, and you're going to have people saying, Sunday fun day! At the beach, getting brunch, just flying in from our trip. We're trying to keep up with everybody else. And it's more in our face than ever before through social media. And so we're just trying to keep up. Look at what they have. I want to keep, again, grateful for what we have, our life, what the Lord's entrusted to us. Another reason why we just fail to be content is we live in an instant gratification culture. So here's how my mornings look. I've got the morning routine with the kids. So, there's like 4 kids waking up, and then there's me and my wife. She'll be up in the next couple hours for sure. I'm kidding. She's in here. I'm kidding with her. She likes to sleep later than I do, okay? But we get up and we got a routine going on. They know, get dressed and do this and do that. Hey, babe, I'm sorry. Let me just pause this. I'm really sorry I said that publicly. And you're the most beautiful girl in the world, and I wouldn't want to be with anybody else. And so I just need to get that out of the way. I feel that burden to say that right now. Anybody know of a good marriage counselor in here? Okay, good. But we're getting ready, and this is what breakfast looks like for us. I pop a sausage, egg, and cheese croissant into the microwave, and in 1 minute, 30 seconds, they are eating a croissant of egg, cheese, and sausage, and then we head out the door. I didn't have to cook or make from scratch that croissant. I didn't have to cook that sausage or that egg. I just popped it into the microwave. That becomes our mentality for life. You realize that? Our entire life, we want everything to be right here, right now. And so if we want that thing, it doesn't matter if we have the money for it. We want it right now, and so we just go get it. Because guess what? I've got this little plastic card. It says MasterCard on it, and it's really my Master, but I'm going to use it. We as a culture do not know how to delay gratification. And our Christian life is one of delayed gratification. That we're living for eternity, not for this little speck called life, but for all of eternity. That what I do now radically affects forever. And so I'm delaying gratification because one day Jesus will come back and fully, completely establish his kingdom, create a new heaven and a new earth. That's what I'm living for. But in our culture, it says, no, pop it in the microwave, and in a minute 30, you have it all. If you want it right now, just go out and buy it. You don't have to do the hard work. You don't have to have patience. Just do it right here, right now. And so what? We get into debt. So some of you are like, oh, that's a really cool plan that you have laid out. All right, I'm supposed to give and be radically generous. I'm supposed to save and invest. And then I'm supposed to live on just what's left over? Yeah. And the reason why you're saying, I can't do that, is because you are enslaved by debt. For freedom, Christ has set us free. What if God tells you to go? Well, you first are going to have to check with your other master. What if God tells you to give? Well, you're going to have to first check with your other master to see if that master called debt will allow you to go, will allow you to give. You see how crazy this is? So what do we do with all this? Where do we go from here? Well, first, you first have to accept the freedom afforded to us in Jesus. If you don't hear anything else outside of this, this is what I want you to hear today. That we are spiritually bankrupt. That there's a debt so significant and so large that we owe because of our sin to God. We could never repay it. It doesn't matter how good we are. It doesn't matter how many good deeds we've done. We can never repay our spiritual debt ever. It's too big. It's insurmountable. from a human perspective. But God, in his grace and in his wisdom, this is what he did. He sent his one and only son, Jesus, on this earth, and he lived a perfectly sinless life. The life that you and I should have lived, he lived that. And then he offers this magnificent trade on the cross. And here's the trade. He takes on my rags, my filth, my sin on the cross and makes a payment for it. He took the punishment that I deserved, and he bore it all on the cross in my place for my sin. 3 days later, he rose victorious, conquering hell, Satan, death, and sin, and every kind of bondage. And when I trust Jesus, I've been set free. See, today you need two things. You need grace and you need wisdom. How to handle your money is a matter of wisdom. But every single one of us needs grace because we're spiritually bankrupt. And we need to be saved from our debt. Jesus steps in and goes, I cover it completely. If you've never trusted Jesus to cover your spiritual debt, today is the day that you can now say, I trust him and I am debt free because of Jesus. First, accept that. Then we can talk about wisdom. It's grace first and then wisdom. Next, live within your means. What has God entrusted to you? What has God entrusted to your family? Don't look over the fence at what other people have. He's entrusted a certain amount to you and to me. And we're called to be faithful, whether that's little or whether that's a lot. I love what Pastor Ross said last week. He says, make a budget and don't budge it. He's smart. Make a budget and don't budge it. Like, you understand, like, we have to live within these confines. This is what the Lord's entrusted to us. And so we're living in that. We've got a budget. We know what's happening with our money and with our stuff. So we're living by that. If you've never done a budget in your household, may God be gracious, and today you start making a budget for your household and you live within it. And finally, pay off debt. Pay off debt. Right now, you are a slave to what you owe. So do whatever it takes to pay it off. In our financial peace class, like we said, start selling everything. You're selling so much that the kids think they're for sale. Like, you're just selling off things you don't need. You're getting rid of it. You're getting rid of it because you're like, we don't need this. We need to pay off this debt. Have a side hustle. What's something you could do to make a little bit of extra money and release yourself from this master? I love Pastor Austin, our Connections pastor. He came to me about a month ago. He's like, hey, I think I got an idea for a side hustle. I'm like, oh, what is it? He's like, dog poo. Come again? Dog poo. So this is your scheme to make extra money to pay off debt? Yeah. I'm gonna go clean people's yards of all the dog poo. And I'm gonna be a guy that they come home and there's no dog poo in their backyard. I'm like, that's great. I mean, that's creative, that's awesome. I love it. He no longer wants to be a slave to debt. So whatever it takes, he's gonna pay it off. I would encourage you, what debt do you have that you just need to pay off and say, I'm done with it. I'm done with it. Dream with me for a second. God's intention is for his people to be a free people. So what if you had no debt? What if you had zero debt? You didn't owe anything to anybody except for love. What could you do then? When God said go, you could go. When God said give, you can give. I mean, isn't that cool? Wouldn't that be so freeing? That's God's desire for all people, to live as free